Welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today our guest is Francis Lucille. Hi, Francis.
Hi.
And this is a bit of a special occasion for Conscious TV because normally we film our programmes at the studio in West London, and we're very used to going in the studio. It's all organised for us. And today we have an outside crew coming in as experiment because Francis couldn't make it to London. And we're in the middle of a week-long retreat that you're doing here at Rupert Spira's home here in Shropshire, and we met last night for dinner, and I really enjoyed our conversation. It was quite feisty at times, and there were some disagreements. I was going to just start by asking you something that came up later on in the evening, which interested me a lot. It was to do with the intent of the seeker. Somebody here was saying in their own, I'm putting this in my own words, but the intent is so important. The passion for the truth is so important for a seeker, someone trying to find the truth. And I'm just wondering what your response to that is.
Yes, it is important.
Yeah.
It is the only determining factor for the success of this endeavor. The rest is almost irrelevant. Because the rest is about the abilities of the mind and of the body. The problem is that if the mind is strong, it has accumulated strong obstacles. And therefore, there is no advantage having a strong mind. There is no disadvantage either, because the same strong mind which has accumulated the obstacles has the ability to deconstruct them. However, the sole prerequisite for success is the love, the desire for the truth. That cannot be conveyed by a human touch. It is only conveyed by grace, which is God's touch.
But the thing that interests me is that people have awakenings in so many different conditions and situations and backgrounds. And certain people have awakenings, they've done no spiritual work, they've had no interest in that, and yet something happens that fundamentally changes their life, changes the way they see life, and then in their own way they start looking. It's almost as if, whatever we call it, awakening, realization, it's random at times, and it will hit someone who's a seeker, but it also, I'm using my own words here, hit obviously, it hits someone that's done nothing.
Yes, perhaps. However, you have to be careful when we use the word awakening, we may be talking apples and oranges.
Apples and oranges. So what do you mean by that?
I mean by that what one person calls awakening is not necessarily the same thing.
Well, that interests me. So let's have a look at, because the word awakening comes up, realization comes up, enlightenment comes up, non-duality comes up. So I'm wondering how you see them different from one another.
Awakening would be the experience of consciousness seeing itself in the absence of objects, in its total freedom and independence, in its autonomy. It is a revelation of absolute happiness, of absolute splendor, of absolute love and intelligence. That would be awakening or enlightenment, or as a result of this transforming event, a gradual elimination of the residues of ignorance takes place. that could be called the self-realization process that ends up in the experience of our natural state, which is the absence of any illusion as to what we are, either at the level of thoughts, of concepts, or at the level of bodily sensations, feelings, sense perceptions. Now, what was the other term to define?
Well, we also, I mentioned enlightenment and also non-duality.
Now, duality would be the belief in the existence of more than one reality. Non-duality could be expressed by the simple formula, there is only one reality. Another word I think deserves to be defined. It's the word consciousness or awareness. In my vocabulary, I use both as synonyms, perhaps because in French we only have one word, consciousness.
Okay.
And consciousness is that, whatever that is, which is hearing these words right now, whatever that is. That's a definition. So we have a level playing field now. And start.
Okay. Well, that interested me when you said consciousness is whatever is hearing the words now. That's a good question, and not an easy question to always find an answer to.
Well, on the one hand, we are absolutely certain that these words are not lost. I mean, there is a receiving end. Right? There is some entity which is in this moment hears and understands these words.
Absolutely.
They are not lost in some nothingness, in some oblivion. They are being heard, being perceived. And consciousness is precisely whatever it is.
And are you saying it can be one thing or another? You're saying whatever it is?
We usually believe it to be, if you come from a materialist vantage point, we believe it to be a physical body that does the perceiving. If we come from an idealistic or idealist vantage point, we believe it to be a mind. In other words, we identify this consciousness in both cases with some kind of an object which is limited. A limited mind, a human mind, a limited body. Now, my contention is that there is no evidence of such limitation. That there is no experiential evidence of such, that there is such a limitation of consciousness or in consciousness. We believe that there is plenty of evidence that consciousness is limited. We believe there is a full body of evidence. But we believe that only for as long as we don't try to take this evidence into consideration, to look at it. As we try to look at it, we discover there is none. I've been trying for some time.
And you found no evidence?
Yeah, usually what I do is, as friends, truth lovers, is to try together again to find whether there is such evidence. and we discover together there is none.
And you still do this process?
Yeah, it's great fun.
Traditionally, it's been sometimes the question, who am I? Is that how you do it, or you have another way of doing it?
You know, all the questions, they boil down to one single question. Yes, what am I? I want to be my real I. What's the meaning of life?
And what have you found the real I to be?
What, the meaning of life?
Either the real I. The meaning of life for me is a bit of a misused word these days. The real I interests me.
The real I is, if we look at our experience, everything we know, what I could call our human experience, everything we know it either as a thought or as a sensation in the body or as an external sense perception, something we hear, something we see. That's the nature of everything we know at the phenomenal level. Now, our experience is comprised of two sides, if you will. On the one hand, this phenomenal side. On the other hand, the consciousness that knows, right? That's all there is to our experience. That which is known, that which knows. Now, since, and also, there is, beyond the shadow of a doubt, an element of reality to our experience. If I would come to you saying, your experience is a complete illusion, it's non-existent, you would say, wait a minute. In my experience, there is something rather than nothing. What I perceive may be a dream. However, the fact that there is consciousness, that there is perceiving, is beyond the shadow of a doubt, at least to me, right?
Yes.
And the fact that it is beyond a shadow of a doubt, to me, is sufficient for me to make the statement, there is something rather than nothing. There is an element of reality to my experience. So, where does this element of reality of our experience lie? Where is it to be found? Certainly not on the perceived side of things, because that which is perceived always changes, is never the same. Thoughts, perceptions, sensations, they come and they go. Since they are not lasting, they are impermanent. Reality cannot be found there. The only thing which is permanent in our experience is the consciousness side. Therefore, the reality of our experience, the centrality of our experience, the core of our experience, is the consciousness. It is that which you call I, or the self. So I, or the self, is the reality of our experience.
But people perceive things in many different ways, and it isn't necessarily always to do with interpretation of the personality or the senses. And I wonder, is there a unique flavour for us as individuals that is still real and not just the personality playing games?
See for yourself, what is it? You know, on the one hand, that there is, beyond the shadow of a doubt, an element of reality to your experience. And this reality cannot belong to that which is perceived, because after all, everything you are perceiving could be a dream in this moment. Since when we are in the midst of a dream, we are not aware that we are dreaming. The implication being, right now, we could be in some kind of a dream. I'm not saying a night dream, right? But some kind of a dream.
Yes.
And therefore, however, that which is common to dream and all the states is the consciousness of them. Therefore, since everything we perceive could be an illusion, the only place where reality could be found is in consciousness. And since we are so certain that there is an element of reality to our experience, if we add that to our understanding that it cannot, this element of reality can only be found in and as the consciousness that perceives, I think I raise my case.
There's something that, I understand what you're saying, and there's something that interests me. And if I go back to my previous question, put it in a slightly different way, I understand, and I sometimes experience, it's not my continual experience, the never-changing and the ever-changing. I have experience of that. And there's something about the never-changing that still has a meanness to it. It's,
That still has?
It's not a real word, a meanness. It's unique to me as a human being, and it's not as if I feel there's a manipulation going on from my human side. It's like you are a unique expression of the never-changing, of the oneness, the ground of being, whatever we call it, and I feel I'm a unique expression. Everyone in this room is, everything is a unique expression. So what is it about the different forms of expression that we can somehow explain? I don't know if I put my question very well, but...
No, the answer is in your question. There are different forms of expression. That's all there is to them. There are different forms of expression. But the form, the multiplicity is in the forms, meaning in that which is perceived. Only forms are perceived. Forms belong to the perceived, not to the perceiving. So the distinction, the differences belong to the perceived, not to the perceiving.
Yes, no, I understand that. Yeah. We touched on a little bit about your life last night. I know you don't want to go into a lot of personal details, but I'd just like a little bit of an outline of how you first got interested in, let's call it a spiritual journey, or we can call it the search for the truth. I know that reading Jiddu Krishnamurti really touched you and was somehow a catalyst for you on your journey.
I think everybody gets interested at some point, in some way. Some people are born, they are born mystics. They are born with a love for the absolute stamped at the deepest of their being. Others have to go through some kind of absolute failure in their attempt to secure happiness, applying the recipes they have inherited from their parents and from society. That was my case, the second case.
Okay.
But the circumstances are different for every single truth seeker or truth lover. And what happened in this case cannot be transposed to any other case. So that's why I'm a little careful not to give this impression that it has to happen in the same way or according to the same pattern. And the varieties of expression of the divine are infinite. And she always surprises us. So that which can be predicted is the unpredictability of it, the unpredictability of grace. And that's part of the charm of grace, that it cannot be predicted, that it surprises us.
One of the things that I found particularly interesting, because you do in one of your books, you do briefly describe, won't call it a process, but a series of events that happened and how it affected you. And it interested me because my situation has been opposite, if you like, in terms of my journey. And you were saying that pretty much you had the interest with Krishnamurti, it sparked something, it resonated with you. And then you studied a lot in terms of reading Krishnamurti and other people. Then I think you found Jean Klein as a teacher. And it's as if you learnt a lot of things, and then sometime later a realization happened that was very significant. Now with me, what's happened is that it's almost the other way around. I've had experiences which have been hard for me to understand with my mind, and hard in other ways as well. And that's been the trigger for me to find out more. And it sounds like you were almost preparing for something you thought might happen, whereas I'm kind of almost like catching up with things that have happened. And it's taken me a long time to really integrate experiences and see what that means for me as a human being living my life.
So you are just bringing some supporting evidence to what I said, that her ways are infinite.
I'm also trying to bring you out to talk a little bit more about this subject because it interests me.
About what subject? The diversity of ways?
Well, it's. I think I try and make the interviews practical in one way, so that people who watch them aren't necessarily scholars of non-duality or whatever, but people who have had or are having experiences in their life, to try and give them a bridge, a window into a wider world, if you like. Because a lot of people are very isolated. I know when things happened to me, I felt very isolated, very alone with things I didn't understand. So, and you have a certain clarity, which certainly comes across in your books and in your talk last night or your session last night, and that's what I'm trying to encourage you to do.
Yes, if you want to be practical, let's try to be absolutely practical. Let's assume you're told you have been somehow served the wrong type of mushroom, and you only have 2 hours to live.
I know this one. I know someone that this happened to. Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
What is the question that you would ask? What would be the most important question? Because then, in this circumstance, my guess is that it would be the most practical question, right? So, what is your most important question? What is the question that would be yours?
So, if I had 2 hours to live, and I knew that was a finite time pretty much, mushrooms is not a good example because I know it affects your reality a lot.
Not right away. You have 2 hours of...
Before it really kicks in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, only 50 minutes.
50 minutes. These are super fast mushrooms. Okay. Well, it's interesting because what comes up to start with is very practical things about tidying up certain affairs and wanting to make things clear on a human level for me. That comes up as very important. And why is that important? That's important because I value my relationships with other human beings. And I want things to be in good order, much as they can be.
Because of love.
Love is certainly a big part of that.
Love
Caring for people.
Love is that which is important.
Yeah. And then there's the thing that's always... I'm just thinking of somebody who was... he wasn't a good friend, but he was certainly a friend, and he lived in a kind of awakened state. He had a meeting with somebody, and something triggered something that was very dramatic in him. And then he died a very painful death of cancer in a hospital. And he died in the end in a hospice, which is where people go to die in England. And at that time I didn't visit him because I wasn't such close touch with him. But people that visited him said that he had pain, but he was also so excited. And he was saying to the other people, isn't this exciting? We're going to die. I wonder what happens. And I think that would be a strong thing in me. I wonder what is going to happen. And by that I mean, I wonder what, in your terms, consciousness really is. What truth really is. Because at that point, that's all I have. I'm not so sure about past lives and all the rest of it. I'm really not clear on that one. But I think that would be my question. What's going to happen now?
But, I mean, you will know in now 45 minutes.
Well, maybe you've given me something I don't know about.
The point I was making is that which we usually call practicalities. What we mean by that is usually, money, relationships, cars, houses, retirement, and a few other things. Health. But when things really become really when circumstances become forceful, it turns out that these things are not important. As you said, love is important. Truth. In these 45 minutes, what can I do?
What would you do?
Wait peacefully.
That's a wonderful thought, that you can wait peacefully, because I think there's very few people on the planet that can say that.
That which is never goes out of existence, and that which is not never comes into existence. That's a verse of the Bhagavad Gita. And Parmenides, the Greek sage, said almost the same thing, word for word.
So there's a big question comes up. How, as a human race, have we got so far away from that?
Is that important?
It intrigues me, because what is the human race? It's consciousness playing with itself somehow. It's still consciousness seeing itself. Why? Why does consciousness play this game?
Why not? As long as we believe that there is something to be gained or to be lost in this game. We may ask this question, but the moment we understand that nothing can be gained or lost, it's like a theatrical play.
But we get so caught up in it.
Not 100%, that's why we enjoy tragedy.
So we partly do it because we enjoy tragedy.
We enjoy the safety of the watching an horror movie, or we enjoy the safety of the sofa in which we sit. In a way, the horror in the movie reminds us of the safety of our home, of the sofa, and of the chips on the coffee table, and of the Coke, of the beer, of the tea here. It is the same in the universal play. The movement in it reminds us of the repose in which we have our being. It points towards it.
There's something about attention that also interests me. And I can speak personally on this, that I see more and more it's where I put my attention, or where, looking at a lower, high level or a low level, whatever, is where I allow my attention to be, that affects my experience. And it's as if I do have a choice in one way, to allow my attention to be as much as it can be with a never changing, or my attention can be various degrees with it ever changing. Some give me quite a lot of awareness, other times almost lost. Was that something that you had to work at all? Can you say something about that? Does that resonate with you, that question?
It fits into a more general framework, which is the question of free will. How free are we to do this or that, and in particular to shift our attention from this to that? As an individual, we have the appearance of such a freedom. But since we don't choose our thoughts, which is easy to verify, if we could choose our thoughts, we could choose not to have any thoughts, or to have only happy thoughts, or thoughts of a certain color, beautiful thoughts. So obviously we have no control of our thoughts. Therefore, if you don't choose our thoughts, we don't choose the choosing thoughts that is going to shift the attention from A to B. We simply believe, after the shift has taken place, that we have chosen as a separate individual, whereas in fact the shift itself, or any thought or any decision that appeared, was simply a cosmic event. And it makes sense, even in a materialistic point of view, where every thought that arises is a byproduct of the electrochemistry taking place in the brain. This brain is made of particles dancing together that are entangled and deeply in a deep connection with the rest of the particles in the universe, so that whatever seems to happen locally, the creation of this thought, of this decision, is in fact a cosmic convergence, even from this materialistic vantage point, a cosmic convergence. So it is not a personal creation, it is not homemade. By home we mean this factory here. There is no such a thing as a human factory of thoughts. It's a nice hypothesis, but it doesn't have four legs to stand on.
But it's something as human beings we're faced with as a reality. We have, majority of us, overwhelming majority, have a strong thought process, and it is something that in a way we need to, on a human level, learn to catch the thoughts. So as I interviewed someone a few months ago, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's done a lot of research about the neurotransmitters in the brain and how continuously having the same thoughts actually tangibly reinforces the wiring in the brain. And that's what we do. A lot of the time we have negative thoughts over and over again, which reinforces the transmitters in the brain. And that can be tangibly measured, that the more you have the thoughts, the stronger the wires are that connect parts of the brain. And then if we are aware of that and we catch the negative thoughts, then they get weaker on a tangible level. It seems to me that that's, if we're going to develop in terms of our spiritual journey, let's say, that's something also that we need to do on a human level to work like that.
There is no way, in my understanding, that the human body creates its thoughts. It doesn't make sense. The human body is not an isolated system. Even from the vantage point of physics, it doesn't make sense. It is in complete connection with its surrounding at every moment. It has been conditioned by its surrounding and by its genetic programming. There is no freedom there. It is the universe that converges in this event, the local creation of a thought. And then the second thought, which is the illusion that I create my thought, that's also a thought, which is a cosmic event that is created the next moment. In other words, the local thinker, its only existence is an afterthought. During the thought, there is not a local thinker. There is a cosmic event taking place.
No, on one level I understand that, absolutely, but I'm also trying to look at things more practically. But
no,
I'm not
that which is true is that which is practical. The only question is that true or not, you see? Because you could say in a way, okay, quantum physics or physics is not practical. It's theoretical. However, this camera is to a large extent based on quantum physics at many levels.
Yeah, and that for me is what makes our journey as human beings is so intriguing. There's so many ways to look at things. That's the richness that we have.
Yeah, but there are also ways to look at things that are reasonable, and there are ways that are unreasonable. You can, let's assume you have written several checks and they bounce, and your banker asks you to pay him a visit in his office. And he tells you, you see, here is check number so and so and so and so and so and so, and here was the balance before you draw these checks, and there was not enough, obviously. And you say, yes, perhaps according to your logic, but in my feeling, there is enough.
Bankers these days do the same thing because they create their own money.
Having been in finance yourself, you understand what I mean, right?
I understand what you mean, yeah. But on the other hand, it's an interesting thing you bring up, because I could then say the whole banking system is based on a complete illusion because they just create money as they need it.
That's true.
So
every metaphor, every image has its own limits, right? Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. We cannot push the envelope. But for the simple purpose of what I wanted to convey is this, of course, I'm not... there are many kinds of things being said. However, many things that are being said are not reasonable. I tend to try to stand on the side of the reasonable.
I'm finding this interview very hard, and I'm wondering why that is. My feeling is I can't get in. Is that to do with me or you or both of us or consciousness? What's your experience of what's going on between us?
Perhaps you're not happy about my answers.
No, it's not your answers. It's just my feeling.
My answers don't really hit home, so to speak.
That's probably true. Actually,
my answers. You kind of say, okay, on the intellectual level, well, I somehow more or less agree with you, however, but there are many other levels, and at those many other levels, I don't agree. You are visiting the banker, and you say, yes, if I make the additions, I agree with you. However, there are many other levels, I don't agree.
Yes. Yeah.
So, in my view, you should then make the statement of what is it that brings these other levels to the light of presence. Let's see where the problem lies, or where the resistance or the I speak to you from my experience in the moment. I don't speak to you from something I know, from the past. And I think it is only in the moment itself that we can have a real meeting.
I feel available for that meeting.
You are the interviewer.
I've forgotten about the interview. For me, it's a meeting. It doesn't matter about the interview. I do this because I enjoy it. If the interview doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not the important thing. I'm not fixed on the end result. I like a nice result, but it's not the most important thing. The important thing for me is the meeting.
I agree with that. It is the same here.
So Dave over there has told me a few minutes ago there was 10 minutes left. There's maybe about 7 minutes left. What would you like to say? How would you like to use the last 7 minutes? Do you have something you'd like to say?
I just answer questions. Because it is the questions that triggers the answer.
Right.
You see, if there is not the urgency, the intensity in the question, the answer doesn't come. It is in a way the desire that from which the question originates that pulls the answer out of presence. I'm not answering questions. I'm listening to questions, and then I'm listening to the answer.
I had lots of questions written down, but as you notice, I haven't looked at any of them. I wanted to say, I usually do a few questions. I have a few in reserve, but I try and be as spontaneous as I can.
Yes,
Just sit with the person and look and see what's there. So I don't have lots of clever questions to ask.
Yeah, but clever questions, they are not interesting. True questions. A true question is a question to which we don't have the answer beforehand, number one. And number two, a question that really motivates us. A question to which we are eager to hear the answer, to have the answer.
You have a question for me?
No, because it is not for me to know what your questions are or is. It is for you to know.
Yeah.
I cannot do that.
I've run out of questions. I don't want to check my notes. So we're going to end by just, as I like to do, I'd like to tell people you have a couple of books out here, Francis, Lucille, and I'd like to thank you for coming. It's been an interesting experience for me, and thank you for watching Conscious TV, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, Iain.
Thank you.